Welcome back to the Michael Lofton Show on Reason and Theology. Let's talk about Pope Honorius. This stuff is coming up a lot. We see it not only from Protestants and Eastern Orthodox, but in fact, we actually have some alleged Catholics using the case of Pope Honorius to substantiate their theological dissent. Let me give you an example. So Taylor Marshall, a very well-known figure in Catholic media, is currently using the case of Honorius to substantiate the claim that we can accuse the Pope of heresy and we can judge the Pope for heresy. And he's having to do this because his dear friend, Bishop Strickland, who was just removed from ministry, has judged the papacy and has accused it of heresy. So he has to look for some kind of way to defend that in light of the prohibition and canon law against it. And what he wants to say is actually, ironically, very, very much reminiscent of what we see with Eastern Orthodox, which I found that interesting because I just came out with a book called Answering Orthodoxy, where I engage 30 of the most common Orthodox arguments against the Catholic Church. And one of them is the case of Honorius. People will try to present that. Orthodox will often present that as something that disqualifies the Catholic claims. And they'll often use an argument that sounds very, very similar to what we see Taylor Marshall doing. Let me actually show you on my screen what's going on with Marshall and what he's not telling you about church history. And let me show you how he doesn't even know the basics of our own ecumenical councils, specifically the Eighth Ecumenical Council that discusses this issue. All right, so let's see what he says. Well, he says, in Catholicism, both statements are true. The first see is judged by no one. And by the way, first see refers to Rome, so the Pope. Number two, Pope Honorius, let him be accursed, or anathema sit. And then he says, Pope Honorius was anathematized by the church. And then he has an interesting screenshot, or an interesting picture here in the screenshot. It says, we must remember that Honorius had been accused of heresy, and that is the sole reason for which inferiors may lawfully resist their superiors by freely rejecting their pernicious opinions. And what Marshall will try to do is he'll try to use this to support his own personal dissent against Pope Francis and even cover for his friends like Bishop Strickland, who have accused the papacy of heresy. And he'll say, see, in this case, you can judge the Pope. In this particular case, if the Pope is teaching heresy, you can judge him and you can lawfully resist him. But see, what he doesn't tell you is the context behind this discussion, which our Eighth Ecumenical Council settled. You see, he doesn't seem to be aware of that. Our Eighth Ecumenical Council from the year 869 to 870. We often speak of the first 7 ecumenical councils. There's more than that. There's 21 of them. Well, unfortunately, Taylor Marshall doesn't seem to be aware of what the ecumenical councils teach. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to read to you from the Acts of the Eighth Ecumenical Council that specifically talk about the case of Pope Honorius. And in fact, it not only shows that he left something crucial out, it's also a pivotal point that completely condemns what Taylor Marshall is doing and Strickland are doing, and among others. Let me show this to you. I took a page of one of the, took a screenshot, or a picture, I should say, of the Acts here. A page of the Acts. This is from, I believe it is the 7th session. Let me double check. Yeah, 7th session. And let me show it to you on the screen so you can follow along and you don't have to spend $190 purchasing this book. I'll rather just share the page with you. Unfortunately, it's not cheap to purchase the Acts of the Ecumenical Councils. So here I am offering this to you for free. Well, it says the third address by the Pontiff, which was read out by the deacon Peter. Okay, so this is the Pope through his deacon at this ecumenical council. They're discussing the case of Pope Honorius. Watch this. This effrontery is intolerable. And what are they talking about? Well, they're talking about Photius, who sat in judgment of the papacy and accused it of heresy. Kind of like Taylor Marshall, who has multiple times accused Pope Francis of teaching heresy, and has Bishop Strickland, his friend. Both of them have done that, just like Patriarch Photius. And here the Pope says this effrontery is intolerable, beloved, and I confess the hearing of my heart cannot endure it. Who of you, I pray, ever heard of such a thing, or encountered such immense presumption, at least in reading? Although we have read of the Roman Pontiff passing judgment on the prelates of all the churches, we have not read of anyone having passed judgment on him. For even though Honorius, now pay attention to this part, even though Honorius was anathematized after his death, or after this death, by the Easterners, it should be known that he had been accused of heresy, which is the only offense where inferiors have the right to resist the initiatives of their superiors, who are free to reject their false opinions. And that is all that Taylor Marshall showed you, right? He didn't show you the rest. Here's the rest. Here's the kicker. Although even in this case, no patriarch or other bishop has the right of passing any judgment on him unless the consent of the Pope of the same first see has authorized it. Right there. Completely failed to tell you the rest. You see, he only told you the one part about how the Pope can be judged in the case of heresy, but he doesn't tell you who the Eighth Ecumenical Council says does the judging. It's not Taylor Marshall. It's not a bishop. It's not a patriarch. Guess who does the judging against a pope? Another pope. Yeah. A sitting pope, a living pope, can judge his predecessor. So a dead pope can be judged by a living pope. So if you currently have a live pope, a pope who's alive, who's right there by your side saying, yeah, I'm right here on board with you condemning one of my predecessors. Okay, cool. You're good to go. You won't have any problems from me. 2 thumbs up from me. If Pope Francis allows you to condemn Pope Francis or any of his predecessors, I'm right there with you. Because the Eighth Ecumenical Council notes that is the only case in which a pope can be judged, when the Pope himself is authorizing it. But when you don't have a pope authorizing it, nobody, not a patriarch, not a bishop, not a YouTuber, nobody can judge the Pope. And this same council anathematized anyone who would do such a thing. So in other words, Taylor Marshall and what he has done is something that the council itself anathematizes. What Bishop Strickland has done in accusing the papacy of teaching heresy is something anathematized by the Eighth Ecumenical Council. And they see it as a massive, grave, grave sin. And if you continue to read that section, it is incredibly interesting. But I showed that to you to show you how figures like Marshall, they don't seem to know a lot about church history. And they come across this stuff and they think, that settles it. I get to accuse Pope Francis of heresy. I can condemn him. I can resist him. But they don't seem to be aware that, wait, it's only the Pope who can ascertain those things. It's only the Pope who can judge those things. Let me show it to you one more time. So now that you've seen the acts, you'll see how disingenuous this is from Marshall. And then I'm going to show you how even more disingenuous it is, because I'm going to go to the Sixth Ecumenical Council itself. Here's what it says. He again says, the first see is judged by no one. Pope Honorius, let him be anathema. And he quotes, "We must remember that Honorius had been accused of heresy, and that sole reason for which inferiors may lawfully resist their superiors by freely rejecting their pernicious opinions." But he doesn't read to you the next part of the sentence. "Although even in this case, no patriarch or other bishop has the right of passing any judgment on him unless the consent of the Pope of the first see has authorized it." You don't know church history if you're using the case of Honorius to justify your own dissent against the Pope. In fact, that particular example is the one that the Eighth Ecumenical Council uses to condemn you and to anathematize you. You just don't know it because you don't know church history. And you're now using a Protestant and slash Eastern Orthodox argument against the Catholic Church, and you don't even realize it. But what's even more interesting is this. Not only did he not show you the rest of it, not only does that also show you that what he is doing is anathematized. I'm actually going to really throw you for a loop here and show you that the same council who anathematized Pope Honorius is the same council that actually argues that Honorius was free from any error in his teachings. I kid you not. I kid you not. I'm going to show it to you from the Sixth Ecumenical Council. The same fathers who accuse him of heresy are the same fathers who explicitly accept the proposition that Honorius was free from error in his teachings. Now, I've done a whole video on, okay, are the council fathers contradicting themselves here? Is there a way of harmonizing? Actually, there is a way of harmonizing that. Like I said, I did an interview on this where I discussed my book, Answering Orthodoxy, because again, what we're seeing from Marshall is an Eastern Orthodox argument that he is employing, which again shows you, as I've been saying all along, guys like Marshall are ripe for the picking for any Eastern Orthodox to pick them off and help them become Eastern Orthodox, because they're already there. They're already using their arguments and they don't even know it. Well, here I did a video with Pat Flynn and I reposted it also on my channel. It's called Catholics Considering Eastern Orthodoxy, Answering Eastern Orthodoxy with Michael Lofton. I'll put a link to it in the show notes. So I'm not going to reinvent the whole wheel here and explain to you why I think the council fathers are not contradicting themselves. I give you a solution to harmonize those two things. Because on the one hand, they anathematize them for heresy. On the other hand, they're saying Honorius is unblemished in his teaching authority. Seems like a contradiction on the surface. But in fact, it's actually not. But let me show you as proof that this is what the council said. And guys like Marshall won't tell you this, most likely because they are not aware of it. All right, watch this. So this is Pope Agatho writing to the emperor, and this is read out loud at the Sixth Ecumenical Council, and the council fathers accept this letter and they endorse it, they back it up, they completely wholeheartedly sanction it and everything in it, completely accept it. Now, watch what Pope Agatho does. Now, let me remind you, Pope Agatho is after Pope Honorius. Okay, so we're talking about somebody after Pope Honorius. So when he speaks of his predecessors, that includes Honorius. Watch this. "For this is the rule of the true faith, which is the spiritual mother of your most tranquil empire. The Apostolic Church of Christ has both in prosperity and in adversity always held and defended with energy, which it will be proved by the grace of Almighty God, has never erred from the path of the apostolic tradition." You hear that? Rome has never erred from the path of the apostolic tradition, nor has she been depraved by yielding to heretical innovations, unlike Constantinople and all the other sees. "But from the beginning, she has received the Christian faith from her founders, the princes of the apostles in Christ, and remains undefiled unto the end." This is why Eastern Orthodox scholars like Schmemann admit, yes, papal infallibility was taught at the Sixth Ecumenical Council. They admit that. There it is. Remains undefiled unto the end. Not just until that time, but the teaching authority that never erred from the path of tradition will remain undefiled unto the end. And now notice this interesting part. According to the divine promise of the Lord. So this is literally backed up by Jesus, that it will be undefiled unto the end. So if it is defiled, then that means Jesus's promise has failed. But of course we know Jesus's promise cannot fail, and therefore it will be undefiled unto the end. So papal infallibility based on a divine institution right here in the council. But here's the part where they clear and accept Honorius as free from error. According to the divine promise of the Lord and Savior himself, which uttered in the Holy Gospels, let's see, to the prince of his disciples, saying, Peter, Peter, behold, Satan has desired to have you, that he might sift you as wheat, but I have prayed for you that your faith fail not, and when you have converted, strengthen your brethren. Notice he's applying that passage to Peter, to the successors of Peter in Rome. He says, let your tranquil clemency therefore consider, since it is the Lord and Savior of all, whose faith it is, that promised that Peter's faith should not fail, and exhorted him to strengthen his brethren. Now watch this. Here's the kicker. How it is known to all that the apostolic pontiffs, those are called popes, the predecessors of my littleness. Who's a predecessor? A predecessor is someone who comes before you. Who came before Agatho? Well, one of his predecessors is Honorius. Now notice this, he says, the predecessors of my littleness have always confidently done this very thing. What did they do? They have been undefiled in their faith, protected the Christian tradition, have not yielded to heretical innovations, have not erred from the path of apostolic tradition. The predecessors of Agatho, which includes Honorius, have always kept the faith in their teachings. Right here at the Sixth Ecumenical Council. Now, the Council Fathers, what is their reaction to this? Do they say, wait, hold on, no, we don't accept that, Honorius is a heretic? No, they accept that, which tells you two things. Number one, they accepted papal infallibility, which is a little awkward for Eastern Orthodox. Number two, they accepted that Honorius was undefiled in his teachings. Now, several sessions later, they condemn Honorius as a heretic. Are they contradicting themselves? Or is there something else going on here maybe? Again, I recommend the video that I did called Catholics Considering Eastern Orthodoxy, where I go over a way to harmonize them and show you they're not contradicting themselves. Sneak peek, what they're condemning in Honorius is what they believed Honorius was saying in his private person. Whenever they clear Honorius here and accept him as not erring from the faith, they're speaking about his teachings as pope. Because, of course, we make a distinction between a pope teaching as pope and a pope acting in his private person. They were saying in his private person, he materially held the heresy, but in his teachings, undefiled. So even the case of Honorius doesn't map on to condemning Pope Francis for teaching heresy in his magisterium, because even the case of Honorius wasn't about that. Also, the Council Fathers erred. The Council Fathers erred in their judgment of Honorius as a private person. Here's Bellarmine, who Marshall really loves. And even though it's just Bellarmine's opinion, for some reason, Marshall really values Bellarmine's opinion over everyone else's, it would seem, the way he talks about Bellarmine. So let me use Bellarmine. Bellarmine agrees with what I'm saying here. Bellarmine says Honorius actually even wasn't a heretic, that the Sixth Ecumenical Council erred in its evaluation of Honorius. You know who else agrees with me on that? Pope John IV. Yeah, an actual pope. You know who Pope John IV is? He was one of the successors of Honorius. And he caught wind that people were accusing Honorius of heresy. So guess what? The Pope writes an actual apology that is a work defending Honorius. Yeah. And this is, by the way, before the Sixth Ecumenical Council. An actual Pope wrote a defense of Pope Honorius showing Pope Honorius wasn't a heretic. You know who else defended Pope Honorius and showed that he wasn't a heretic? Maximus the Confessor. Yeah, a martyr for the faith. Maximus the Confessor, good old Maximus in the Eastern tradition, showed in his disputation with Pyrrhus, the heretic patriarch of Constantinople, he showed Pope Honorius was a heretic. This is why Anastasius Bibliothecarius, among others, papal librarian, several centuries after the Sixth Ecumenical Council, can write and say the Sixth Ecumenical Council in its judgment of Honorius erred. It did not err in its judgments on matters of faith and morals, but it erred in its judgment on who Honorius actually was or what he actually held to. But even if it didn't, even if it was right, it's referring to a judgment about Honorius in his private person, not in his teachings as Pope. So here is what I just find fascinating. Marshall will just throw this out there as if it is just so clear cut. It's just a done deal. I mean, it's just so simple. I mean, it's just clearly the case that you could just judge a pope. I mean, Honorius, right? Honorius, bro. Don't we hear that all the time from Protestants and Eastern Orthodox? But wait, what about Honorius, bro? You hear that usually from the Orthobros. Why is it that a Catholic is repeating this? He's not telling you the rest of the quote from the Eighth Ecumenical Council saying that only the Pope can judge the Pope, no one else. And then number two, he doesn't even show you that the same council that condemned him as a heretic and anathematized him actually said that Pope Honorius was free from error in his teachings. And he also doesn't show you that, in fact, the Sixth Ecumenical Council erred in its evaluation of Honorius to begin with, because you have numerous figures such as Pope John IV, Maximus the Confessor, well up to Bellarmine, showing that Honorius wasn't a heretic. When Honorius spoke of one will, he's not teaching one physical will. He's teaching a moral will. In other words, the humanity of Jesus is not in conflict with the divinity of Jesus. There's no conflict between the two wills of Jesus. Who else substantiates that? Joachim Saliveri. Go read his manual, and you'll read him explicitly saying exactly what I'm saying. And you know who he says that in response to? He says that in response to Protestants. Why? Because what Marshall presented to you is actually a Protestant / Eastern Orthodox argument against Catholics. So I don't find it impressive when Catholics use the arguments of non-Catholics to back up and substantiate their own theological dissent. The fact of the matter is the Eighth Ecumenical Council condemns what Taylor Marshall, Bishop Strickland, and Cardinal Mueller, add him to the list. He's now also accusing Pope Francis of heresy. Add him among them. He also is condemned, or at least that behavior is condemned, in the Eighth Ecumenical Council that tells you you can't do that. Even a patriarch can't do that. Only a pope can judge another pope. It's serious stuff. And we shouldn't tolerate this. People who are claiming the name Catholic, constantly hurling abuses at the Pope, and attempting to judge his see, but then they come with half-truths, and they neglect other things, and then violate canons from our ecumenical councils. Not to mention the current code of canon law. It's serious stuff. And again, our forefathers would be in shock if they saw people condemning the Pope in the way they do today. They were of the opinion that when a person does this, they can't be saved. Now, I'll tell you, if you rashly judge the Pope and you falsely accuse him, if you repent of that and go to confession, you could be saved. And I bet if you twisted their arm, they would have acknowledged that too. But they write about it so harshly in here that they just speak about people who do this as condemned to eternity in hell. That's the Council Fathers for you. That's not Michael Lofton making this up. That's our own ecumenical council fathers. Take it up with them. In other words, it's a very serious issue. It's a very serious and grave offense. And so if you're judging Pope Francis, you're accusing him of heresy, you need to go to confession and you need to make acts of reparation. You can start by clearing Pope Francis's name. You can start by telling people, hey, I was wrong for condemning Pope Francis and accusing him of heresy. I'm going to walk that back. I'm going to take that back and I'm going to apologize. And by the way, y'all, I went to confession for this. You could start there. That would be a good place to start. God's forgiveness is available, but you have to take that step. If you don't, then you're persisting in error and you're persisting in a grave sin. So I hope this was helpful. I see a couple super chats. Thank you so much for this. Christian Catholic Media says, thank you, Michael. Keep it up. We see you. God bless. Appreciate it. And Jacob, thank you for that super sticker. I really appreciate y'all's support and help. Hey, if y'all have a couple questions, go ahead and put them in the chat right now to at Reason and Theology. I'll stick around for just a few minutes here and answer a few, and then I'm going to head out. But if y'all had any follow-ups for this or anything that you needed clarified, go ahead and put it in the chat. Let me go ahead and look through and see what we got. Let's see. Why bother being Catholic if you're Taylor Marshall? Well, you assume too much. Is he Catholic? Is he Catholic? You're assuming too much. But number two, I think what happens is some people remain in that odd limbo phase because they haven't yet connected the dots with other things to see where this leads them. They haven't yet connected that. Or, it could be that their livelihood is tied into being Catholic and stuff like that. And often those things factor in as well. Let's see. Let's see. Looks like there's a straw man here from Francois. Michael is unable to conceive of the church being overwhelmed but not prevailed over. What? Really? Really? I'm unable to conceive of the church being overwhelmed. Okay, I just conceived of it. And number two, that's even consistent with what I just said here. There's nothing that I said that would say the church can't be overwhelmed. What in the world? I know it's late. I know it's like 10:45 or something p.m., but yeah, no, come on. You got to come stronger than that. Let's see. Telling half-truths can be the worst lies. Sure. Especially when you only quote half the quote like Taylor Marshall did. Let's see. Just wanted, excuse me. Sorry. Just wanted to say thank you for your clear and non-emotional treatment of the state of the church. You have given me such solace. Thank you. I really do hope it's been helpful. I've been getting a lot of messages from people lately. Well, a lot of nasty ones, a lot of hateful ones, but then also a lot of really good ones, and people who are saying, "Hey, you've really helped me. Thank you." So I really appreciate you all. Let's see. We must always remember that do not judge the Pope. It's virtuous to suffer in silence and pray to our Lord for continued truth and guidance to our Pope, then publicly, privately denouncing him. Yeah. I mean, canon law says that the first see is judged by no one. But then the rest of that, historically, it's not in the current code of canon law, but there's always been appended to that. Not always, but in some cases, in some transmissions of that rule, there was the appended part to that said, unless he's found, wanting, or unless he's found in heresy or something like that. But again, as we saw in the Eighth Ecumenical Council, it's only the Pope who can evaluate that and say that. So nobody else can judge a Pope for such a thing. And even in such case, it wouldn't be the Pope teaching heresy. It would be a sitting Pope judging a predecessor Pope for privately holding to a heresy, not for promulgating it or teaching it. See, that's another assumption that a lot of people make, and they shouldn't make that faulty assumption. Um, as a Catholic layman, I have no right of condemning the Pope of heresy. What more for a bishop to do that? Yeah, well, a bishop can't do it because a patriarch couldn't do it. Two patriarchs were condemned for it, Dioscorus and Photius. So if they're anathematized for it, yeah, a bishop can't do it. A YouTuber like Taylor Marshall can't do it. So Satan is the master of telling half truths. Absolutely. God bless you, Michael. Well, hey, I appreciate that, Tony. You too. TM is on a rampage. Yeah. You notice he's having to defend papal heresy and the claim of papal heresy lately because he's the one found guilty of accusing the Pope of heresy, and so is his friend Bishop Strickland. And so now he's kind of getting that pushback that you can't do that. And so he comes with this whack stuff in response, and then he has to get called out and showed that he doesn't know church history. So that's why we're having to go through this. Francisco says, keep up the good work. Thank you. Simon says, for clarity's sake, what is the difference between criticizing and judging? Great question. It's a good distinction. I'm glad you brought that up. So here's a difference. Can you criticize the Pope? Yes. In fact, Donum Veritatis would allow that. So would Canon Law, Canon 212. If it's constructive and respectful, you can criticize. Now, I would say don't be quick to do it. Don't be quick. And Donum Veritatis would also recognize, don't be quick to do this. But is it conceivable? Is it possible in some cases? Yes. And it could even be public. You don't want to put any kind of pressure on the papacy through mass media. Donum Veritatis warns against that. But could you just express that charitably with respect publicly? Yes, you could, but that's different than judging. Like, judging is going to be more condemning and accusing. I'm saying that you are guilty of heresy. That's judging. Criticizing can be more, I'm very confused by what the Holy Father says here. I don't understand how to square what the Holy Father says here with this. I'm open to hearing how to resolve those things, and I'm open to correction. I just don't see how to resolve that tension. There's a difference between that and Pope Francis, you're teaching heresy. You're violating the Council of Trent. This is what Bishop Strickland and others did. Well, you can't do that. That is what gets people anathematized. So there is a difference between judging and criticizing. Thank you for the super chat. Let's see. Former Lutheran Missouri Synod, currently in Catholic RCI, and I have to say I'm really happy I found your channel. Thank you for helping me on my journey. Thank you. I really am happy that the channel has been helping you. If there's anything I can do for you, just let me know. I'm really glad to hear you're in RCIA. That's awesome. And again, thank you for the super chat. Steve says, I hope this isn't controversial, but would you say that this current Pope has shown weak leadership? Yeah, so here's where we could speak about like criticizing this pontificate. I'm not a huge fan of this pontificate, despite what people will tell you. I'm not. Do I think it has shown some weak leadership in some instances? Yeah. He's had some moments where he did well, and showed some strength, but he's also had some moments that, in my opinion, has shown weakness. Now, in fairness to Pope Francis, I would also say that about Benedict and John Paul II. I'd say that about them too. I mean, look at some of their appointments, and look at some of the people that they allowed and tolerated in the Catholic Church. I'm just always left scratching my head thinking, why in the world were they not excommunicated? So I think that about Pope Francis, why he tolerates some people, but I also think that about John Paul II and Benedict and others prior to him. Why did they tolerate so-and-so? Why did they make so-and-so a cardinal? Why did they make so-and-so a bishop? So it's not just Pope Francis that I have that criticism of. Let's see. What do you think is the solution? to influencers with large followings going against the Pope, leading people astray, excommunication. I think bishops are going to need to be more aware of what's taking place by people in their territory. Right now, they are very much out of tune and unaware of what's taking place on social media. I kid you not. I could tell you some horror stories of how little the bishops know of what's actually taking place on social media by really important social media figures. So they don't tend to be very well aware of what's going on. Eventually, they're going to need to be more in touch with reality. I know that's difficult because they have a lot on their plate. I totally get that, but they're gonna have to do something about me being more aware of what's going on social media and start to discipline some of these people because frankly, some of these YouTubers need to be disciplined. I don't know if it needs to go to excommunication just yet. If I were their bishop, I would try to talk to them first. I would try to reason with them. I would try to help them. But if I saw they were obstinate, yeah, you better believe I'm eventually going to excommunicate them and publicly tell people in my diocese, this person has been excommunicated. They're not in good standing with the Catholic Church. They are not a Catholic. I would be very clear about that. Let's see. Absolutely on the right track, Michael. More Catholics need to hear this. Thank you, Colin. I appreciate it. The absolute vile hatred towards and lies about the Pope have gotten completely out of control. Doubling down my prayers for the Holy Father. Yep. Hey, Father Brown, great to see you. He says you're the best. Keep it up. I appreciate that. Y'all go and check out his channel. It's pretty helpful. He did a video earlier today on Ignatius, Saint Ignatius. It was really helpful. I agree with TM when he speaks about obvious liturgy abuses. Well, I think most of us do, right? The problem isn't that he doesn't have some legitimate concerns. The problem is that he has excess in his solutions to those concerns. That's the problem. Let's see. Of course, great expounding. Thanks, Michael. Also, you're sounding better. Still coughing, granted, but your voice is coming back. God bless you. Yeah. This is my 12th day now of dealing with this. Yeah, I'm still dealing with the coughing, but at least I don't have constant fevers and all the other stuff that was going along with it. It was pretty wild. If you're publicly criticizing the Pope in an act of governance and causing disobedience, isn't that a violation of canon law? Now, when you say causing disobedience, yes, that would be a violation of what was it, 1373? Canon 1373, I think. Let's go to it. Simply criticizing a matter of governance is not necessarily causing disobedience, though. That's the qualification I would make, but yeah, it is. Yeah, it is 1373. A person who publicly incites hatred or animosity against the apostolic see, sound familiar? Or the ordinary, that's the bishop, because of some act of ecclesiastical office or duty, or who provokes disobedience against them. There's the term that you use, is to be punished by interdict or other just penalties. So in the way you described it, yes, that person is in violation of canon law. God bless you, Michael. Don't take this on your shoulders. It's God's issue. Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, but at the same time, God doesn't expect us to just sit back and allow people to wreck the church. He uses people to speak the truth. You can't just say, God will take care of it kind of thing, right? No, God uses people to take care of things. And so I'm not just saying, hey, everything's on my shoulder. No. And I do trust that God is going to take care of issues, but I also am not going to say, well, that means I just get to bow out and I don't have to say anything. No, I have an obligation to speak up. Let's see. Thanks, Michael. I appreciate it from Australia. Awesome. That's cool that y'all were watching in Australia. Do you think it's weak leadership because he's promoting dialogue? No, I don't think that dialogue per se is necessarily uh, weak leadership. No, there's nothing wrong with promoting dialogue. The problem is whenever you just leave things to dialogue and never discipline somebody, um, or we just dialogue and we never challenge people, right? Um, that's when dialogue becomes a little um, abused. When does Return of Pachamama come out? Oh, that's great. He says, "I can hardly wait." That needs to be a movie. Right? I could totally see that. Oh, that's hilarious. We were talking about that the other day. You're a faithful follower of R&T. Do you think the church will implement a discipline on the clergy regarding social media use and exposure beyond their parish or diocese? Yeah, yeah. I mean, eventually something's going to have to be done. Um, hmm. I'd like to see Rome have a stronger influence on government. Yeah. Um, I personally think Taylor Marshall is one of the guys leading Strickland down the path he's gone down. Apparently, he's close with Strickland. Yeah, according to Marshall, he is, and yeah, I do think he's misleading Strickland, and I kind of suspect that he is the guy who wrote that um, atrocious and demonic letter that Bishop Strickland read at the Rome Life Forum from his friend. I don't know that. I mean, that's just speculation on my part, but it just sounds like Taylor Marshall. So if it wasn't Marshall, it was a Marshall follower. That's for sure. Perhaps Marshall can come out and tell us one way or the other. I'd love to know. I mean, would Marshall come out and say, "I wrote the letter," or "I didn't write the letter"? I'd like to know just either way, and then either way, well, if you didn't write the letter, do you agree with the letter? I'd like to know that. But if he wrote it, I think he should come out and be honest with people and tell people that he wrote that. Let's see. There's a super chat here. What are the odds Cardinal Fernandez becomes the next pope? Thank you for the super chat. I don't know. I mean, I could see it. I mean, Ratzinger he was over DDF and he became public. Could be. And he's killing it over in the DDF already. He's doing a good job. So I could see it. If Fernandez is Pope, you're going to get someone who's a little bit more blunt. A little bit more blunt than Pope Francis. I kind of feel like Pope Francis handles things with kitty gloves compared to Fernandez. I've seen some things from Fernandez already that he's not going to pull any punches, and he won't back down from a fight. Not saying Pope Francis backs down, but I'm just saying that I think their temperament's a little different. Could I name 3 good things about Marshall? Existence is good, right? So there's that one thing. I mean, he exists. That's good. He speaks about Jesus, right? Jesus is a good thing. So sometimes people have an opportunity to learn about Jesus. And he tells people to pray the rosary. That's a good thing, right? I mean, nothing wrong with praying the rosary. That's helpful advice. So praying the rosary, praying the Our Father with them, on live streams. Those are 3 good things, I think. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I see a super chat. Thank you so much for that, Dave. I really appreciate that. Looking through. Pacha 2. Pacha 2, the return. I'm gonna need to make like some kind of graphic for this movie trailer. Oh, oh boy, that would be interesting. Let's see. Uh, Taylor Marshall was just trying to make Michael write a sequel. I mean, there's a lot of Protestant arguments that Taylor Marshall uses, and some Eastern Orthodox. So I could probably fill up a book responding to them. Is TM just an SSPX plant? No, I think that TM Marshall came into the church sincerely, and he just got led down the wrong path, just like I was, but he's just never found his way through it. Now he does now promote the SSPX, but I don't think he's like a plant or something, as if he was always SSPX all along and just came here to infiltrate the church. No, he really came to the Catholic Church because he believed the Catholic Church is established by Christ. That's why he came to the Catholic Church. But he's just found himself, got himself really, really tangled and confused. And he also doesn't listen to a whole lot of feedback about his views. So he doesn't really progress. He doesn't really grow a whole lot. You'll grow a whole lot more if you listen to people critique your views. Thank you, Truth Brigade, for gifting those memberships. I appreciate you doing that. Let's see. Pacha 3, A Journey's End. What was the other one? Pacha 2? What did we say it was? What was it? let me see. Hold on. Sorry, I couldn't get to the mute button in time. The Return. Okay, so Pacha 2, The Return, and then A Journey's End. Are these references to the Lord of the Rings? I'm slow, y'all. Hold on, let's see. Lord of the Rings trilogy. I'm looking for them. Okay, the Fellowship of the Ring, the Two Towers, and the Return of the King. Okay, so I failed on that one. Never mind. Y'all are gonna crucify me for not knowing Lord of the Rings well. Pacha-fied Big Mama. Pacha 4, back to the Pacha. Emperor's New Pacha. Pacha Mama versus Pacha Dad. Oh, this is crazy. Pacha 10, the end to all Pachas. Pacha 7, another one. Pacha 11, don't forget Pacha Papa. This is great. I think this is good. This could go on forever. Pacha in space. The more y'all make me laugh, the harder I'm gonna cough. So. Pacha in space. And what's funny is I can actually see some of this. Pacha 10 Tokyo Drift. Isn't that like the car movie or whatever? The Fast and Furious thing. Aliens versus Pachamamas. Which one's scarier? Pacha 8, the Ocho. Pacha beats Jason. I think Jason would lose. Y'all are killing me. I'm done. I gotta tap out here. Pacha and the Planet of the Mamas. we, we can do a whole stream at this point with Pachamama. Oh, that's epic. This is great, but I gotta go. I'm tapping out. I'm gonna cough up a lung here from the bronchitis. I give it a couple more days and I should be back to normal. I feel like, maybe 85% out of 100. So I'm getting there. Anyways, hopefully this was helpful. If it was, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button. Good to see you, Logos Project. Great to see you in the chat there. The Pacha is out there. I was just watching X-Files too. You had to say it. I'm slipping into the Pacha zone. Ain't nobody got time for that for the bronchitis. What was that lady? I got bronchitis. Ain't nobody got time for that. That was a classic news interview. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Laughter is the best medicine, Michael. Yeah, I mean you have to bring some levity, Otherwise the dissenters will just drive you crazy. The dissenters on the left and right. But frankly, I actually hear more from dissenters from the right than I do the left. I kind of feel like, what happened to the liberals? Did they just all die out or something? I actually think they did. There was a statistic that I just saw where there's like a really low amount of liberals at this point. So I do think that they probably just, most of them died out, and that's why we don't hear from them anymore, which I'm not complaining. I'm fine with that. I'm perfectly fine with not hearing a whole lot of liberal arguments. But I also wouldn't, I don't want to hear the ones from radical traditionalists either. So, but yeah, but since we get a lot of those, you need some laughter, you need some humor, you have to bring some levity to your life. Let me show you. I know I'll get flagged for this from YouTube, but here's something that you just need to do to decompress. Let me see if I can find it, and then I'll let y'all go. Okay. All right. So whenever you just like, okay, I can't do it anymore with the rad trads. They're driving me crazy. I want you to watch this video. Okay. This is a video you need to watch. And I'll probably have to like delete it out after a few hours because YouTube will flag me for it. But y'all get to see it since y'all are watching live. So again, whenever you feel like I can't do it anymore, they're driving me crazy, you need to go to YouTube, type in Vitas, Vitas, and type in the seventh element. We're going to watch a few minutes of it together. Somebody asked Tiger King. All right, Tiger King 2. That would also work, but try this one. I promise it'll help. I promise it'll help. Watch that. Somebody says it's Russian. Oh, okay. I had no idea, but it's mind numbing, but it'll help bring some levity to whatever you're going through. So maybe just check that one out. Or actually, I have an even better one for you. What's the name of that song? Hold on. Okay. I'll just type it in the chat for y'all, so I don't get flagged for this one as well. I don't know how to say this guy's name, but it's called "It's My Life, Whatever I Want to Do" by Venu Malish. I just put it there in the chat. Y'all, again, if you feel like the stress is just getting to me, you need to go watch that video, okay? It's on YouTube. It's available for free. Go and watch it. You'll thank me later. All right. Hit that like button. Hit the subscribe button. We'll see you later. God bless. Are you a Catholic thinking about converting to Eastern Orthodoxy? Or are you a Protestant discerning whether or not to become Catholic or Eastern Orthodox? If so, I have the book just for you. It's called Answering Orthodoxy. and engages all of the arguments that Eastern Orthodox use against the Catholic Church. I respond to all of them. I show that they are in error, and in fact, they're inconsistent, because the things that Orthodox are objecting to are in fact found in their own tradition. So the fullness of the faith can only be found in the Catholic Church. Check out the book right now at shop.catholic.com for your copy today.